ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Gerrard Gosens has achieved a striking number of physical feats in his life as a professional athlete. He's represented Australia in athletics and triathlons. He's swum across most of the English Channel and made an attempt on Everest. He's flown a plane around Queensland 3 times and come second on Dancing with the Stars. Now, I should mention that what has made all of this differently challenging is that Gerrard was born completely blind. Though that's not something he himself was really aware of until his first day at primary school. By then, Gerrard was already a master of using his other senses, hearing, touch, smell, to make a map of the world, one he could navigate brilliantly. Today, Gerrard uses his finely honed senses to succeed in surely the greatest of all physical achievements known to humans, the crafting of delicious chocolate. Hi, Gerrard.
Hello.
Tell me, please, about this first day at primary school. What happened on the school oval?
I think for every kid who goes to school for the first time, it can be either traumatic or I suppose enlightening in a sense of the whole excitement of being there amongst all your fellow peers and being in sort of the rural areas. Teachers had a very innovative thought about burning out some of that nervous energy of the school. There wasn't that sort of set structure of get into the classroom and get down to the books. It was, okay, well, let's get into the oval and let's burn out some of that nervous energy of being there for your first time. And I was keen on running. You know, I enjoyed the physical activity, and I was sort of following the sounds and the giggles and the whole excitement of the kids around me. And off we started going, jogging around. You could feel the sort of the soft grass that was dewy first thing in the morning under your feet. And I was listening as I sort of was quite accustomed to, and jogging around the oval, and poof, this sort of big wooden cold thing sort of hit me in the face, and sort of felt out with my hands and felt this sort of round post, and realised that the kids had continued running, and obviously they'd seen the goalpost, and I sort of went along and bumped the second one and third and fourth with my shoulders, and realised obviously that these were goalposts on the actual oval, and realised that, hey, these kids can see it, and I can't.
And had that difference really not clicked for you before that?
No, because it was quite normal. Because I think obviously when you live on a farm and you were sort of somewhat separated from your fellow peers because they were kilometres away. For me, it was just that normality of actually walking around, and you knew where the I suppose the squishy bits of mud were, or the steps, or you could hear the animals, the ducks, the geese, the donkeys. They were all your little sound, I suppose, environments and knowing where things were. And it wasn't until sort of being out there in the, I suppose, big open school grounds. But it did have its advantages over the school itself, because we had demountables, and you had the old wooden floors or the creaky sort of stepping of there was all these things which created pictures in my mind.
So that's when you discovered you were blind, Gerrard. What about your parents? When did they first realise there was something going on with your sight?
Yeah, it took quite some time, because for them it was just that sort of, okay, well, it's just a young baby, and it took it up until about the age of 1 where they realised there was a significant problem. And that was purely because the condition I had, which was aniridia and glaucoma. The aniridia is actually having no irises, and the iris is what expands and contracts the pupil to receive light. And the glaucoma is obviously the pressure that builds up at the back of the eye, and obviously can and did damage my eyesight. For them, there was a lot untold. There was still a lot of experimentation in, I suppose, trying to cure the glaucoma, because that created incredible pain at the back of the eye. So there was this sort of unknown. It wasn't until the age of 1 where they realised how significant, I suppose, the situation was.
What sort of treatment was available back then in the early 1970s?
It was. I was sent to London, to Enfield Hospital in London, and there was to try and do surgery to release the pressure at the back of the eye. And that was a great thought, but in actual fact it worked the opposite, in the sense that when you go into the body, you obviously dig a canal to release pressure at the back of the eye. What does that body do? It recovers and it heals. And what does it then do? It creates scar tissue. So that scar tissue then created more intense problems because obviously there's a greater blockage than when they first started.
Do you have any memory of those surgeries, of that treatment? Is that a legacy that you kind of have in your body somewhere, do you think?
All I have memory is of the, I suppose, the doctor holding me down and giving me the needle. I'm not sure what the needle was for, whether it was for the operation or some needle, and that's where I think my dislike of needles began at a very early age.
So this surgery hadn't worked out and your parents brought you back to this farm that you lived on in Victoria. Did they become very protective of you once they knew that, okay, you didn't have sight and you weren't going to be able to have any vision?
No, I think that was quite the opposite, in the sense that because of my family's, in particular my father's side, the upbringing they had through the Second World War, and particularly my grandfather, there was get out there, give it a go. If you run into something, so be it, get up and keep on going. The same expectations were on me as were on my younger brother when he came, and to do the responsibilities on the farm, whether it be, cleaning out the chook pen or the stables. There was no real sort of, I suppose, compensations for being totally blind.
When the time came for you to go to school, how did you get there?
I suppose the unique thing about it was my brother, who was fantastic assistance, obviously, in getting to school, because I would follow the sound of my brother's bike. They were the days when you would put a bit of cardboard, a bit of a peg and a bit of cardboard on the spokes of your bike. So it sounded really cool.
So wait a minute, you'd follow your brother on his bike?
Yeah.
You were riding?
Yep. So I was riding a single bike behind him and using that bit of cardboard on the spokes, so that obviously created a sound, and there wasn't a huge amount of traffic being in a rural area, so I could follow the sound of his bike to school. And
did you ever have any accidents?
One major one, and that was because my brother was sick. And I said, I know, I can get to school on my own. I know the dirt road, I know the bitumen. Obviously, when you go on dirt road and bitumen road, you can hear the sound underneath your tyres. And I was riding along, and this car was only there for the first time ever and never again. It was just parked on the side of the road. It was a four-wheel drive, and I went smack into the bull bar of this car, came down. I was sort of all bloodied up and continued on as a little kid, and off I went to school and got to school, and the teachers were horrified to see all this blood coming down my knees, and patched me up and went into school. And it was just that. It's like that sudden shock when you hit something straight away. It's like it wasn't sort of an ease into the bang. It was bang.
It's that extraordinary thing for someone who's got vision to understand that you can just use sound to ride a bike. That if you know the path and you know the direction that you're going, that's enough information for you to get there safely, as long as there's not a parked car in your way.
Oh, I did a lot more crazy things. Like even when I was older and I was living in central Queensland at Yeppoon, I would keep one foot on the bitumen and one foot on the gravel and run to Emu Park. And there's a swamp there with all these frogs, and I could hear the whoop of the frogs, right? And I knew that that's where I had to turn around. And then when I came back, the only road that was turning right was where my street was.
You loved physical activity, sport, right from the start. How old were you when you started playing AFL at school?
Very young, because obviously both at primary school, in amongst the school sports, but also in the local area. And for me, because of my height and also, I enjoyed the running, I was sort of taken as a tagger. And my role was then, if there was a good person on the team, I would stick close by them. And if the ball came anywhere near them, I would get them out of the way. And I could use the sounds in the oval. So these were the days when parents would sit either end of the actual oval in their cars, because it was normally cold. And you could also have the smell of the hot dogs coming from the canteen, the good old sort of smell of the rubbing oils that people would use on in the sheds. There was all these things, the wind coming through the trees on one side of the field, and my parents would toot the horn every now and again, so that gave me my whole bearings. And then you had the muddy bit of the centre patch, because kids would run around in big groups. There's never really any sort of full forward, centre forward, whatever. All the kids just run around as a group, realistically.
And this map that you're describing that you had in your mind, Gerrard, was it something that you were deliberately creating even as a kid, or it just evolved naturally?
Evolved, yeah. It had to evolve. And it wasn't just, even if you were travelling to a new area, and even now as an adult, obviously, if you travel to a hotel or to any location, that's that quick I suppose, utilisation of your own senses to create the pictures. And it could be even walking, for example, down the Queen Street Mall. Like, I challenge anybody to walk down the Queen Street Mall in Brisbane and not know where Lush is, and to pick up the smell of a bakery or newsagents. Like, unfortunately, newsagents are by the far these days, so the smell of print has gone by. But places, chemists, there's all these other stores, and even now the stores, what they're doing is they're creating their own culture, whether it be by the smell that they're actually pumping through the air, or even by the sound of the music they actually pump out from the store as well.
It wasn't just push bikes that you and your brother were riding there when you were growing up. Tell me about the time you were stopped by police on a motorbike.
Yeah, we were. I started off on a 75cc bike, and sort of went through right to a 125. And one day I said to my brother, and I enjoyed running, I said, look, I'll run beside the bike, you ride the bike. Now, on those properties, for me, it's very easy because either the sound of my brother's motorbike, and also you get to know sort of where it be a square shape or a rectangle shape of the property, and if there's muddy areas or the long grass areas, you can use it. Anyway, the weather changed really quickly, and it just became intensely heavy with rain. And I said to my brother, look, you jump on the back, because I was bigger than him, and I'll dink us home. Now, we're on the side of the road. Like, this is I'm still justifying it as a young kid, right? So we're going along on the side, on the gravel. I can hear...
the blind brother, are driving the motorbike,
yes,
and your brother's being dinked by you.
Yes.
Okay, right. I've got that image in my mind.
Right,
Continue.
So we're on the gravel road, right? I'm still justifying. So we're going along, and I hear this car. You know how when you hear cars go past, and this is how obviously you can tell when it's starting to rain. Obviously, the wheels going like, sort of the tyres. And I hear this car go past, which it wasn't that frequent. Anyway, I hear it slow down and turn around and sort of pull up in front of us. And I pull up, and what's the walking of this person, and walks up to us and says, "Hey guys, what are you doing?" And so I explained, "Hey, listen, we're just going to find a property to ride on." And he said, "What's the serial number on the bike?" I said, "Why do you want to know that?" He said, "Well, I'm a police officer, and it could be stolen." I said, "Well, I don't know where the serial number was." I knew where it was, but I couldn't read it, obviously. So he said, "Well, listen, where do you live?" And I gave him the address. He said, "Okay, I'm going home to see your parents. You got to walk the bike home now." So off we went home. And
so did the policeman realise that you were blind?
No, not once. And I think
he just thought you were a kid driving a bike that was maybe nicked, and that was his issue, not the fact that you were a blind driver.
No. And I think what helped me there was because of the intense rain. Okay, I think that was my help. So he's gone home, assigned to my house, and he's told my parents about what happened, and they've acted very seriously because my parents knew that we weren't doing necessarily the wrong thing. We weren't going out of the way to be bad. And we've got home, and parents have told us what happened. Now, I've been booked for everything under the sun. Okay, pillion passenger on the wrong side of the road, no helmet. And I then had to go to the senior sergeant for a talking to this in the local area. Anyway, I've gone there with my mum and my brother, and we're sitting down, and still then, okay, we've been introduced to the senior sergeant. We walked into his room. He still then hasn't realised that I'm blind. And I'm as a little, I suppose, stubborn little kid, I'm arguing with the senior sergeant. Like, it was raining. We had to get out. Like, we just had to get home. And my mum's kicking me under the table saying, "Just shut up and let us get out of here because he doesn't realise you're blind." So I've shut up, and we got out of there. We just talking to, and sort of.
I feel like you should. I don't know. I feel that policeman needs to know that after the fact. I think the statute of limitations. You're okay. You're not going to be in any serious trouble now. But that's really kind of extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, my history of police goes obviously on when we did the April Fool's Day joke in central Queensland, which was an absolute massive success.
Can you reveal more details about that?
Yeah, so when I finished high school, I began work in central Queensland at Rockhampton there. And I thought, what's a good way? Because I was always about breaking down the perceptions. And I thought, okay, April 1st, here's a great chance. Because at high school, I also was known for some of the practical jokes we did at school. Anyway, I got the senior sergeants, Clary Glenrick back then, and I spoke to him about my idea, and he said, "Yeah, no problem." And I borrowed a sports Mercedes convertible from the local baker, big yellow sports convertible. And I got my first guide dog, Joey, and we put myself in the driver's seat and the dog in the passenger seat. And if you go back now, On the front page of the Rockhampton Bulletin 1989, the headline reads, "Blindness, no blinker on licence." It says, Gerrard Gosens and guide dog Joey received driver's licence. Joey does 2 barks for left, a bark for right, and a yelp for stop. Now, what was amazing was that a large percentage of people in central Queensland who read the Rockhampton Morning Bulletin on April the 1st, 1989, believed it. We had phone calls all day to the police station and to the newspaper.
Outraged or impressed?
No. They were curious. They wanted to know how the dog does reverse angle parking.
I want to ask you about Joey, your first guide dog. Whose idea was it for you to get a guide dog?
I think it was both mine and also my parents, more so in the sense that living in places like, for example, Yeppoon, to use a white cane is almost impossible because when the grass dies, okay, so if you're tapping a white cane, where does the road begin and where does the footpath begin? Because the grass has all died. So there's no real sort of indicators of what we call, I suppose, side shoring to know where you're actually travelling a straight line. And for me, the distance I was travelling was me too difficult. So applied through guide dogs. For them, it was a very unique situation because A, I was very young, and B, I was going to high school. So it was the first time ever, and the youngest person in Australia to receive a guide dog. And then to go to a high school, what do kids love to do? Pat a dog. So when you go into a high school, what do kids want to do? Obviously, pat the dog all the time. So we had to establish the understandings, the rules, the guidelines about having a guide dog in the classroom. And look, Yeppoon High School was spectacular in the sense that the kids respected it. My maths teacher was teaching the dog how to count. She had a jar of Goodos on her desk. So the dog had to realise, okay, now it's 3, now it's 4.
Tell me about the first meeting with Joey, what that interaction was like from your point of view.
For me, back then, you were taken to guide dogs in Melbourne. You were spent a couple of weeks there learning how to work with a guide dog. That first meeting was, okay, this is a team. We are going to be establishing a great partnership. But then that first time stepping out onto the roads of around Kew in Melbourne, we've got very busy streets. And to place your trust in a guide dog that you'd never worked with before, the first step. And for me, it wasn't necessarily also about the cars. Being tall, obviously that head height, branches, all those sort of things that stick out. So we, I suppose, established an amazing partnership where I could walk into a supermarket and I trained Joey up to, hey, listen, find the cereal section or find whatever section. Now, that wasn't about knowing what that was. It was about its sense and its location within the actual supermarket.
How did Joey introduce you to a teacher who would become your first guide runner?
That was interesting in the sense that I suppose we had the school swimming carnival, and as I said, I had guidelines around the guide dog, not patting him, and we had a break in the swim carnival, and I thought, okay, well, I knew the whole, wasn't a large pool, like it was in the sense of the area around the 50-metre pool, and it was all fenced off. I checked on that, and I thought, okay, well, I'll let the dog go with a few friends and wander around and say hello to people, and that's why it's a good sort of introduction to having a chance to pat the dog. Anyway, as kids do, off he went, and the kids came back and going, the dog's eating someone's lunch, that's really funny, that's so funny, whatever. Anyway, I then worked out they'd actually eaten the sports headmaster's lunch, breaking into a school bag. And from that day on, the competition, the rivalry between my sports house and his sports house was phenomenal. And then he was also a runner. So he would become my guide runner, training around the oval or doing cross-country runs both before and after school. And it's amazing, Sarah, how at times the smallest of differences can make massive differences in our lives. And I said just that one moment changed the rest of my life.
So you began running with him as a guide, someone who runs alongside you as you're training. Were you also training to run races on your own? Yeah,
I was. And the good thing about Yeppoon High School was the amount of lime they placed on the oval to mark out the lanes. That had sort of created large ruts between each of the lanes. So almost crossing from lanes 1 to 2, 3 to 4, you almost had to sort of jump. They were quite significant canals between them. So you could feel the rut. And you became quite accustomed to, I suppose, that way they overrun, some of the rough bits. Like, for example, if you go to Toowong Athletics level now, where I train, again, you can sort of feel the differences in the intensity of the actual grass. So there's all those things which I could use. And again, the sound came into it as well, whether it be the trees or the particular birds in the trees. There's all these things you could use.
You ran a record-breaking 400 metres at your high school. Tell me about that race.
It was, that again was a life-changing moment, not only for me but also for the people at the school. I trained. I was excited. I entered my school's 400. I was going to really show them how well I could run. That was my whole goal, to break down those perceptions. The gun went, and I knew I had to establish a very early lead. And the reason being is because that way I could hear the puffing and panting, but students behind me. And I got around to the 100-metre mark, and I could still hear the steps of the students and the puffing and panting, and I could hear obviously the crowd and all that sort of stuff, creating that picture it was almost like a sort of a progressive sort of visualization as I was running. Got around to the 200-metre mark, and I knew this was the really important point, because I had to really dig deep now, and gave it all. Could hear the yells and the screams of the crowd. The wind was sort of rushing past the ears, and I lost sight of the sound of the students behind me, but I still went for everything. Could hear the louder and louder screams of the students. I felt myself go across the line, and I was pretty happy because I knew I'd won, because no one behind me for quite some way. Anyway, I'd broken the school's fastest ever 400, and reason being is because of the 205-metre mark, I took a left-hand turn and cut right across the middle of the oval. Not only did I cut right across the middle of the oval, and the reason why they were screaming was because I went through the trophy tent.
That's a brilliant strategy.
And
if you
across
ask me.
the line, and completed 400 metres in approximately 42 seconds. Now, it showed the students that I was really trying to attempt something, but me, more importantly, could laugh at my own particular disability.
You went off to university and were pursuing athletics as well. And in fact, you were training for the Sydney to Melbourne ultramarathon.
Yeah.
And part of that involved you running from Cairns to Brisbane through the little town of Maryborough, which is actually where I was born, Gerrard. So it's an important place for me. But why did Maryborough become an important place in your story?
That's where I met my wife, Heather, and I ran from Cairns to Brisbane 5 times. I had the support of one signal regiment. So my ultimate goal was to be the first person, totally blind, to run the Sydney to Melbourne Westfield run, the days of Janos Gouros and Cliff Young. And I knew I had to both mentally and physically prepare. And along the journey, we would stop in at all the various towns along the way, have a small civic reception. I had 35 soldiers from one sig. Anyway, ran into Maryborough, and actually the thing about it was that Joey, my guide dog, came with us on this journey. And people would assume the dogs run the whole way. So they'd be patting him, massaging his paws, giving him all this attention. Leave me alone. But he sat in the back of the bus, and he hasn't done anything.
He just comes in for the reception.
Okay, that's it. That's all. Anyway, so there's a civic reception there, and Heather walked up and said, "Hey, listen, what's the dog here for?" And they told him, and she walked up and introduced herself to me, and we got talking. Obviously, I invited her out on a blind date, and and here we are today. Yeah.
You had a connection to her family.
Yes, I did. And actually, that's where the whole introduction came from. Her father was the sports physio teacher at Yeppoon High School, whose lunch was eaten by my guide dog. So there's taking 2 bites of the cherry.
Did you and Heather always want to have kids, Gerrard?
Yeah, Heather being a school teacher, obviously the love of kids, and for me, yes, most definitely it was. And then obviously we'd inquired about whether my blindness would be passed on. There'd been no history in my family of obviously the blindness being passed on. We had our first child in Jordan who was fully sighted. And we thought, fine, there's no sort of continuation of the glaucoma and aniridia. And then when Taylor came along, that was, I suppose, the most huge moment where I almost fainted inside the actual operating theatre. Heather was undergoing caesarean section. I was there. They put Taylor into the little crib there, and I was allowed then to feel Taylor's little hands and her little feet. And whilst I was feeling her hands, she pulled her hand closer towards her face, and instantaneously, it's like those things where you have, I suppose, a gut instinct, and just that door opened of the whole shock of, okay, yeah, she has a vision problem.
How could you tell?
The way she pulled my hand closer towards her face, wanting to have a closer look at my hand. That's when I realised, obviously, that something wasn't right. I asked the doctor to come and have a look at her eyes, and she had no irises. She had the aniridia, and she has some vision. She has about 4% vision. But as a father, the reason why I almost fainted wasn't having a child with a disability. That wasn't the situation. I learnt all throughout my life the tricks of the trade, which I learned as a male. But how do I do it from a female perspective? For example, how do I tell her about makeup? How do I tell about how to choose the earring and whether I'm the right way, or all the women's health stuff? How do I explain to all of that and what to do?
She's a young adult now. How have things turned out?
Yeah, really well. She just represented Australia at the Paralympic Games, and she represented Australia in judo. And that was her first time in the sense of competing on such a high level. So she now has more experience and will go on to 2028.
So it sounds like she's taken after you.
Podcast and broadcast. This is Conversations with Sarah Konoski.
In the Atlanta Games in 1996, you were a commentator as well as a competitor. Tell me about commentating on the opening ceremony.
I was so passionate because the coverage, media coverage, was not much back to Australia, and I'd taken a sat phone with me, the days of the good old sort of big block mobile phone, and I had one of my community members was a presenter on ABC Radio. And I called her up to fill her in that, hey, listen, we're just walking into the opening ceremony now. I wanted to give you an update on what's happening, where Australia's going. Anyway, walked into the opening ceremony, and in actual fact, it's a lie. You don't walk into an opening ceremony. In actual fact, you float. You picked up by the sheer splendour of that entire crowd. I've called up the presenter on ABC Radio, and we've sort of started talking for more than an hour, right? And what was amazing for me was not one person called up the ABC and said, how the hell is a blind person describing an opening ceremony? And reason being is because I had a person beside me, obviously giving me information about some of the uniforms, but what they were feeling was what was coming from her voice was my feeling as an athlete walking in there. They weren't seeing it, they were feeling it.
What were you focused on, Gerrard, that meant you had to skip the Athens Paralympics Games in 2004? What had become your goal then?
I was asked to go and present at a dinner for the Fred Hollows Foundation, and whilst I was there, a person approached me about, hey, listen, see you're sort of fairly adventurous, love adventures, would you like to look at a expedition to Everest or the Kokoda Trail? Well, it wasn't a yes or no, it was when can I do it? And I chose the Everest expedition. We have these learned fears in our lives. We have the fear of falling, which is essential for us to be a human being. Otherwise, we wouldn't walk. We have the fear of isolation. That's what brings us together as a community. And we have a fear of noise, and that's obviously the sense of danger, whether it be fire, lightning, the whole thing goes on, avalanches. My learned, I suppose, fear wasn't those fears, was the sense of sort of fear when you dig that little hole and hope like hell your aim is very good when you go to the toilet on places like whatever. And so I went to Everest and went to Everest Base Camp. Now,
I'm scared to ask you about smells, given that anecdote that you just shared. But I mean, for sighted people, you're going and seeing this place with these amazing sights. Which of your senses was most activated in Nepal?
Well, sound and hearing, but more smell in places like Kathmandu.
What's it smell like, Kathmandu?
Oh, it's a concoction of everything, realistically. The smells of obviously all the motorbikes and the sound of one person with their hand on the wheel and one hand on the horn. The various foods they're smelling, the dal bhat, all the foods are sort of pulling together. And then when you take off from Kathmandu and you land at Lukla, and I'm probably got the advantage there because you're landing on a cliff face and most people who can see are terrified. But then it's on Everest, and when you're walking through, it's actually the yak poo. And reason being is because what they do on Everest, they have no, obviously, fuel as in wood to burn, to heat things. So what they do is they dry the yak poo on rocks, they scrape it off and then burn it in drums. And that smell is, yeah, it's pretty full on.
Well, what about Everest itself? I mean, how does it announce itself to you as a blind person? Do you feel it?
You feel it in the sense of the sound of the wind coming through the Himalayas, and also the ice. And also when you go to places like, for example, Everest Base Camp, the rocks, and it's not like a bit of sand and dirt. If you go to a quarry and you find a pile of rocks, it's like walking on. There's not 1 ounce of level ground on it. And that's where I had perhaps one of my most terrifying moments on Everest was one night where there was a very large snowfall, and we would tie a rope between my tent and the taller tent. That night, I've used the rope. I've gone to the taller tent, and whilst I'm on the toilets, or on the rocks and the hole in the ground, there's been a large snowfall. I've come out, no rope. And there's very large winds, and I was out there for at least an hour and a half trying to find my way back to my tent. Now, there's lots of dangers there, because obviously I could wander off and be not seen at all ever again. But for me, it was that persistence of trying to count my steps and positioning to actually eventually find my actual tent.
That wasn't the only dangerous, challenging moment you had in Everest. Tell me about the fall.
Yeah, I was working with a Sherpa, and I think at times my confidence or my determination or stubbornness, you want to call it, I was obviously very independent. I used, for example, my most valuable piece of equipment on Everest cost me $5, and that was a yak bell, which I tied to my fellow climbers' backpack. It provided consistent, reliable communication to save their voice, to save my voice.
So you followed the yak bell up the mountain?
That's right. There was always a ringing in my ears. It didn't take a toll. So we'd climbed up, and he was very, I suppose, comfortable way I was working, and fell through a crevasse.
He didn't think to turn around to let you know.
No.
And so what was the experience like for you? You're walking along, what happens?
Then suddenly it's like I've done a number of parachute jumps, and it's just exactly the same sort of trapdoor effect where, although when you do a parachute jump, obviously you get the free fall moment, but in places like that, it's just that trapdoor effect of straight down and thinking, well, how far am I actually going to fall before the rope takes hold.
And what kind of injuries did you sustain?
Dislocated shoulder.
How did you get back out?
Luckily, as an athlete, I was fairly flexible, so I went back straight back in, but the pain was immense. And then just being able to pull myself, and obviously through the support of my Sherpa, to get back out again.
You haven't made it to the top of Everest yet, but you did meet the first man who did.
I had the absolute honour of having dinner with Edmund Hillary. And when you shook his hand, your hand disappeared. His hand was massive, right? And that was, for me, to get an idea of what he looked like by feeling his hand was awesome as well, because I knew how huge he was.
What did he think about your efforts to climb Everest?
I think he saw within me the determination and, I suppose, driven nature of my attitude as a young kid to actually go on and try things. Whether it be, climbing Everest or flying planes, it just goes on.
Well, let's talk about flying planes. When was the first time?
Don't tell Casa, right? Shh. Because I don't think they still know. So back in 03, 04, 05, we were approached by some pilots who wanted to do some fundraising and awareness, and we sort of came up with this idea because my parents also were pilots, so in the sense of the small Cessna 172s, because my father was a mechanical engineer, and because of his experience with cranes, they would fly him to sail, and then from sail out to Bass Strait to work on the oil rigs. So my parents bought a plane, and they used to do a lot of flying at the local aerofield, and there were many times where you'd be sitting in the sort of the co-pilot seat with my dad, and my dad said, "Hey, take hold, give it a go." There's nothing to run into.
And the ground.
It's at the ground,
Gerrard.
yeah.
Significant.
I know. And so they approached us, and we took on this, okay, well, let's see a blind person fly around Queensland. So we did it 3 times. Took off from Archerfield Airport on these ultralights, Sinus and Avirus, And the great thing about these planes is, A, they have a parachute inside the cabin. Right? So if there's ever a problem, you pop the parachute. And B, they can glide. They're actual official gliders. So there's engine fails, you glide to the ground. So we took off from Archerfield and went around Queensland, so out west to Roma, up to Isa, up to the Cape and back down again, and 3 times, not one problem with CASA. It was great.
So flying planes, climbing mountains, running marathons. Then in 2009, you got a request to do something, even for you, a little bit out of your wheelhouse, to go on Dancing with the Stars. Mm-hmm. Was that an easy yes? Was that as easy as yes to Everest?
Yeah. It was easy, and more so for the fact that it was obviously an amazing challenge. Have you ever done dancing? No. I'd never seen dance, right? So they said, hey, listen, we'd like to consider you to do Dancing with the Stars. And I said, that'd be great. So, but we need to sort of see if you actually can dance. We're not going to sort of put you on there and let you fail straight away. So they put me on a plane to Sydney, had to get into the studios in Sydney, and, okay, you've got an hour. Here's your dance partner. You have to learn a dance. So we're recording it, and we're sending it back to the owners in London who own, called Strictly Come Dancing in the UK, see if you're okay. So I went down there, met my dance partner. We had to learn a salsa particular dance.
And she's teaching you just by moving your body around?
Yeah, just the steps quickly. And because we only had an hour, it was like a test, I think, just to learn that. And recorded the thing, and I'm thinking, well, see how this goes, because I've never seen dance. And so the most challenging thing on Dancing with the Stars wasn't the fact that it was learning the steps. They never told me it's a live band, right? So I went there. I'd rehearsed here in Brisbane at a studio. You play the CD of the actual song you're learning the dance to. But when you go to a live band and it's up there on the stage, right, almost basically at ear level, so it's taking away your hearing as well. So I never knew that. And who knew that they surround the circumference of the floor with lights that stick out? So on my first rehearsal there, I smashed 3 lights. 3. I stepped on, between my knees. And I'm thinking, well, this is going to end pretty quickly. Anyway, got to know where some of the air conditioning units were from the flow of the coming out of the ceiling. Obviously knew where the band was, the live audience. What was terrifying was the 3 cameras that follow you around the floor. But the facials, Sarah, like when they say to you, hey, listen, we're doing the tango, we want a really passionate look. Well, what's that? Or we're doing the rhumba, we want a really sexy look. What the frick is that? Like, how do you look sexy? And when they say they're giving you the evil eye or the come to bed eyes, what the hell? Like, I have prosthetics. How do you? I don't know how to do that.
Well, look, you must have done well because you made it through and ended up being second in that competition, which is just extraordinary. Did you ever have to dance solo?
Yes.
As part of that?
Yeah, and they had like a challenge. I think it was week 4. And like even in week 4, I thought, well, this is good. I've got this far. Anyway, they came in, they put us aside. Hey, listen, competitors or participants, your challenge for next week is you have to dance for 20 seconds on your own. And I've just, in my mind, thinking, well, this is it.
Why was that so terrifying or felt such a challenge, the solo part?
Well, it's live show. And how would I know if I'm facing the right way? I could have my ass facing into millions of people's television and shaking my ass around, or walk off the complete edge of the stage, or walk into the crowd, right? So with my dance partner, obviously, I could use her perfume, her steps on the floor, which were close to actually have some location on the floor. But when she leaves the floor, that's it, right? So it's a live show, live band, and my song was a Michael Jackson song. Now, this is going to be very hard to describe. I'll try. So they said to me, okay, it's Michael Jackson, so this is the part of the song where you have to dance for 20 seconds. Hey, listen, here's a suggestion. Why don't you do the moonwalk? Now, what do you think I did? I stepped forward as if I was Lance Armstrong. So, because that's what I knew.
Of course you did. That makes so much sense.
It does, doesn't it, right?
The backwards Michael Jackson
Who knew
moonwalk.
that? Why the hell is a moonwalk
Lance.
backwards?
You should have won the trophy just for that. That's brilliant.
Like that's normal. Like it's a moonwalk. It's forwards. Like it's not a reverse walk. It's not. So, anyways, they've told me very quickly what the moonwalk was, and I thought, no, I'm not doing that because that's going to lead me right off the stage. Anyway, I was successfully able to get through it. Jessica joined me on the floor, and it was a great moment, just of that sense of relief. But the whole, I suppose, series was the way we got through wasn't about how successful, how good our dancing was about the story we told and the lifts that we created. We would for hours practice our lifts and how I would sort of spin around or throw around or balance her across my shoulders. And there was some moment, like for example, there's a song there, the Horses song from
Darryl
Braithwaite. That Horses song for me, because I know moments of that song where I had to balance her across my shoulders, I had to do the dead drop, all these sort of things. So that's every time I hear it, and it's one of the most commonly played songs, unfortunately.
She must have had enormous trust in you.
Yeah, we have an amazing relationship even today. Like, our closeness is just immense in the sense of the trust we had in catching her, in throwing her, and then along the actual journey. And there was people who, there's a lot of men who are very angry, very, very angry. And the reason being is because they're sitting at home with their partners, right? And they're watching me dance and get through the very serious, and their wives or partners digging them in the ribs going, well, hey, listen, buddy, if a blind guy can do it, why can't you?
So how did you get the idea, Gerrard, that you were going to swim the English Channel?
This is, I suppose, my moment where Heather warned people about asking me about doing various things. I'd come back from the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. I was competing for Australia in triathlon. I thought, that was a great way to retire, and as it stands now, it was, because triathlon's been cut from the Commonwealth Games. And a person walked up and they said, hey, listen, there's never been a totally blind guy swim the English Channel. And from there on in, that sort of, the whole moment grew, and I swam around Great Keppel Island, the first totally blind person to swim the 20 Ks around Great Keppel Island.
Swimming next to someone, or how does it work practically?
Yeah, I have a swim guide. So I have swim guides that have like a small tether, and that's our goal now on the journey, is to now increase the opportunities for not just people who have a physical disability, but people who lack confidence in going out through open water swimming, is to utilise that tether, that design I've made, so they can experience the whole opportunities of swimming out there in the ocean, the freedom of it, and the sensations of the cold and hot currents and the jellyfish, which at times are okay.
Well, so you started doing your training here in the tropical waters of Queensland. How did the waters of the English Channel compare once you got in there?
It was really funny because we'd been there a week, acclimatising, obviously overcoming the jet lag, and we got used to the actual water temperatures. And also the saltiness on the English Channel is actually larger than what is here in Australia, so that the salt content was a different experience. And also the jellyfish. The jellyfish are like 2 metres long, so when you hit them well on. I got stung 4 times for me, but also what was immense for me, Sarah, was the beaches of the UK. They are, like, you really appreciate how good Australia is with the beaches. Like, it's just rocks and sand, and not just pleasant sand, but rocks in the water, rocks on the sand, and getting down and even getting into the water around Dover. It's just all rocks and pebbles. It was funny because my first guide, Hayden, I took with me 6 swim guides with me to the UK. And we jumped off the boat. This is the day, it was like 4 a.m. in the morning. And we swam. You had to swim from the boat to the start line, which is on the shores. And we got there, and I'm getting my watch ready to go. And Hayden's going, let's go. And I said, hang on a minute. He said, what? I said, I want a hug. And it was purely because, like, let's take the moment. It's the moments that make memories. And it was about, hey, listen, we're here. You've done an amazing job getting here. For me, I don't go on kilometres, and that's perhaps one of my biggest mistakes on the channel. I went on my guide, so I would just rotate through my guides every hour as I went through the whole swim.
And how many hours were you swimming for?
14 and a half.
And what happened at that point, at the 14 and a half mark?
So they got to the point where it said, hey, listen, Mother Nature's changed, and as it does, the channel is very similar to Melbourne, where there's 4 seasons in one day. And we got to a point where they say, listen, the tides have turned. No matter how long you swim for, you're not going to get there because the way Mother Nature has turned. And so within 3 kilometres of the shore, we actually could see people on the beach. Well, my team could see people on the beach. It was
that close. That must have been such a frustrating time to have to end.
Yes and no. In my mind, I had assumed that I'd swum terribly and I only travelled at about 20k in that 14 hours. In actual fact, I'd swum 40.8 kilometres. The channel's 34 kilometres wide. Now, there's some problems. We're sort of still working with the Channel Swimmers Association and the pilots because we've found out, obviously, they made some errors in the way they set the course. We'll be going back again to the channel because I obviously recognise that it's unfinished business, even though I swam further than what the actual channel is.
So I guess you can do it in that point.
Yeah, and so, for example, next year as well, we're swimming the 20 bridges around Manhattan, which is a 50-kilometre swim.
Your whole life, Gerrard, you've done these kind of amazing physical feats that you've been involved in as an athlete and as an adventurer. But what's your day job now?
My day job is I'm also a chocolatier, so I own 2 chocolate cafes in Brisbane.
How did that start? How did chocolate become a profession for you?
Through sport. That's really crazy, isn't it? And the reason why I started through sport is that I would travel overseas and it would be as a gift or as I suppose a thank you for sponsors or supporters. I was, hey, listen, that T-shirt there, do you think Sarah would like that? I have no idea. Okay. Or that memento over there, what does it look like? So mementos were very hard to buy overseas. Chocolate was always an easy go-to thing, right? Buy chocolate, walk through, declare it at customs, walk straight through. Fantastic, right? So I developed an awareness and taste of chocolate, and the good thing about that was that it taught me very quickly that chocolate around the world is so different, right? And this is not only down to the ingredients they use, but also the chocolate they use. But even, for example, is down to such thing as the cows. And when I say about cows is cows that eat grass in the UK is very different grass to what Australian cows eat, right? So that's going to produce different flavoured milk. That's why UK chocolate tastes very different to Australian chocolate.
You must have a really extraordinary palate, do you, Gerrard? Like, is that one of the senses of yours that's more highly refined than most of us?
I'm not going to claim to be some sort of, like wine connoisseur, but it's more so just the realisation of some of those small things that can make a huge difference in the taste of something. Developing that, I suppose, understanding of chocolate, and then opportunity came up, and now for 15 years I've been a chocolatier.
What's it like for you to visit a chocolate factory? What's the sensory overload involved there?
Yeah, that was I got the pleasure of they took me to the major chocolate factory in Belgium, just outside of Brussels, and to actually hold a hose that's filling up a tanker full of chocolate, to feel that pulsation of the chocolate and the smell. And apparently every fourth or fifth, whatever, they had 2 guys that jump into the tank and have to clean it out. Like, imagine having that job. But then to walk around the whole factory and actually then to have the chance to give input into what some of the inventions or creations, what they're doing with chocolate, and whether it be, for example, is the intensity of how they roast it through to, I'm very locally orientated. So when I make my very skin, and that's the thing about European chocolate, Sarah, is that they're very boring. They use pralines, like, almond praline, hazelnut praline, and you try one particular chocolate, you try them all realistically. Whereas I use ganaches, as in cream base. So my cream's from Mullaney. My liqueurs are from Stanthorpe. My honey's from some hives around Graceville. I'm all about using my gingers from a place just north of Brisbane called Budrum. And for example, if I'm making a mango and passion fruit, one week I might make the passion fruit a tiny bit stronger than a mango, vice versa next week. Or I'll use Australian beers. For Father's Day, I make what's called the ultimate 6-pack. So I use 6 different Australian beers.
It seems, Gerrard, that right from your earliest days, your blindness hasn't really stopped you from doing anything you've wanted to do. Or has it? Is there something I'm missing that it's felt this is something beyond my ability because of my blindness?
Yeah, there are some definite things which I would love to see, and there are some amazing developments in technology that are going to be placing, and I think it's been approved by the FDA, about implanting a chip in the actual brain, which potentially could provide some vision not too far away, which could be absolutely massive. So watch out the coast with my surfboard and my jet ski. I'll be down there. But yeah, listen, the chance to see my family. I'm fascinated by how far a person can see. I don't know why, but it fascinates me. Where is that point where you see something and then you don't in the distance? And I'm fascinated why people are obsessed by fireworks, right? It's green, it's blue, it's orange, it's purple. Green, blue, orange, purple. It's the same colour, sort of all that sort of stuff. And or even to see a parrot. And when we drive down the coast, and my swim guides know when I get close to places like Talabudra, all the birds in the tree, I wind the window down. And the reason why I wind the window down is because I love hearing the birds. And not just the birds, because it creates a picture of the size of the tree. It's like at University of Queensland, you walk around down there near the river, all the birds in the trees there, up in Noosa, you walk along there, all the thousands of lorikeets and the birds there. For me, that's the picture. It's like when it rains, it creates a picture as well.
That's really beautiful, and it's given me a different image in my mind too. Gerrard, thank you so much for sharing some of your stories with us on Conversations.
Thank you.
This is Conversations with Sarah Kanowski. Hear more conversations anytime on the ABC Listen app.
My guest today was Gerrard Gosens, and there's a documentary about Gerrard's attempt at the English Channel. It's called Changing Channels. This conversation was produced by Rebecca McLaren and recorded on the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. Nicola Harrison is the executive producer of Conversations. I'm Sarah Kanowski. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to a podcast of Conversations with Sarah Kanowski. For more Conversations interviews, head to the website abc.net.au/conversations.